What would you do if you found yourself responsible for two babies that weren't even your own species? Most of us would panic, call for help, maybe even walk away. But what if you were a wild animal, operating purely on instinct, with no handbook on interspecies parenting? Today, I'm going to tell you a story that will challenge everything you think you know about maternal love, survival, and the incredible bonds that can form in the most unlikely circumstances. This is the story of Masha, a brown bear who did the impossible. She became a mother to not one, but two orphaned creatures who couldn't have been more different from her own cubs. And what happened 2 years later? Well, it's something that left wildlife experts speechless and redefined what we understand about the capacity for love in the animal kingdom. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications to catch more heartwarming stories like this one. Our story begins in the dense forests of the Carpathian Mountains, where the morning mist clings to ancient pines like ghostly fingers. It's early spring, 2019, and the forest is slowly awakening from its winter slumber. This is where we first meet Masha, a 4-year-old brown bear who had recently emerged from hibernation with her two cubs. Masha was what wildlife biologists would call a textbook mother. She was protective, nurturing, and incredibly skilled at teaching her young everything they needed to know about survival. Her cubs, barely 3 months old, were healthy and thriving under her watchful eye. She would spend hours showing them which berries were safe to eat, how to fish in the crystal-clear mountain streams, and most importantly, how to stay safe from the dangers that lurked in their wilderness home. But nature, as we all know, has a way of throwing curveballs that no amount of instinct can prepare you for. It was on a particularly crisp morning in late April when Masha's world and the lives of two other creatures would change forever. She had been foraging for food about half a mile from where she'd left her cubs safely hidden in a dense thicket. The sound that made her freeze wasn't one she recognized immediately. It wasn't the call of her own babies, nor was it the cry of any bear she'd ever heard. What Masha discovered when she followed that sound would test every maternal instinct she possessed. There, huddled together in a makeshift den beneath a fallen log, were two tiny, shivering forms. One was clearly a puppy, a German Shepherd mix with fur so matted and dirty that its original color was barely visible. The other was even more unusual, a Bobcat Cub, no more than a few weeks old, with distinctive tufted ears and spots that were just beginning to show through his downy fur. Now, you might be thinking, surely Masha would see these as either threats to her own cubs or potential prey. After all, bears and bobcats are natural competitors in the wild, and domestic dogs, well, they're not supposed to be in the wilderness at all. But something extraordinary happened in that moment, something that defies conventional wisdom about animal behavior. Masha approached the two orphaned babies cautiously at first. Her maternal instincts were in overdrive, but they were pulling her in conflicting directions. Every fiber of her being told her that these weren't her responsibility, that she should focus on her own cubs and leave these creatures to their fate. But as she got closer, something changed. The puppy, who would later be named Scout by the researchers who documented this story, looked up at her with eyes that held no fear, only desperate hope. The Bobcat Cub, later called Felix, was so weak he could barely lift his head. What happened next still gives wildlife experts chills when they talk about it. Masha gently picked up the puppy in her massive jaws, the same way she would carry one of her own cubs. Then, incredibly, she went back for the bobcat. One by one, she transported them to where her own cubs were waiting, nearly half a mile away. But bringing them to safety was just the beginning of what would become the most challenging period of Masha's life. Caring for her own cubs was already a full-time job that required every ounce of her energy and attention. Now she had doubled her responsibilities, and these weren't even her own species. Scout and Felix had completely different dietary needs, different vulnerabilities, and different ways of communicating their distress. The puppy, Scout, was probably around 8 weeks old when Masha found him. He was severely malnourished and suffering from what appeared to be exposure. In the wild, a domestic dog puppy that young has virtually no chance of survival without human intervention. But Masha didn't know that. All she knew was that this little creature needed her. Felix, the Bobcat Cub, presented his own set of challenges. Bobcat cubs typically stay with their mothers for up to 2 years, learning complex hunting techniques and territorial behaviors. At only a few weeks old, Felix should have been nursing and learning the basics of bobcat social structure. Instead, he was now part of a most unusual family unit. The first few weeks were a constant struggle. Masha had to figure out how to nurse creatures that were so much smaller than her own cubs. She had to learn their different cries and what each one meant. When Scout whimpered, it meant something different than when her bear cubs vocalized their needs. When Felix made his soft chirping sounds, a sound no bear had probably ever heard before, Masha had to interpret what he was trying to tell her. Wildlife cameras, set up by researchers who had been studying bear populations in the region, began capturing footage of this unprecedented family. Dr. Elena Volkov, a wildlife biologist from the Ukrainian National Academy of Sciences, was the first scientist to review the footage. I watched the first videos 3 times because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. A brown bear had essentially adopted a domestic puppy and a wild bobcat cub. This went against everything we understood about interspecies competition and territorial behavior. But the challenges weren't just about figuring out how to care for different species. As Scout and Felix grew, their natural behaviors began to emerge, behaviors that sometimes conflicted with each other and with the bear cubs they were being raised alongside. Scout, being a dog, had an instinctive desire to please and follow. He would trail behind Masha constantly, sometimes getting underfoot when she was trying to teach her bear cubs important survival skills. Felix, on the other hand, was developing the independent streak that's characteristic of wildcats. There were times when the bobcat cub would wander off, forcing Masha to track him down and bring him back to the safety of the group. The dynamic between Scout and Felix was fascinating to observe. They had become siblings in the truest sense of the word, playing together, sleeping curled up against each other, and even seeming to communicate in ways that transcended their species' differences. But they were also competitors for Masha's attention and resources. Food became a particular challenge as the animals grew. Bear cubs have specific nutritional needs that are different from both dogs and bobcats. Masha found herself spending more time foraging than ever before, trying to find enough food to sustain her unusual family. She would bring back berries and fish for her bear cubs, but she seemed to understand instinctively that Scout and Felix needed different nutrition. As summer progressed, something remarkable began to happen. Rather than becoming more difficult, the unusual family dynamic started to create something beautiful and unprecedented in the animal kingdom. Masha's own bear cubs, now 6 months old, had completely accepted Scout and Felix as their siblings. They played together, learned together, and even protected each other in ways that amazed the researchers documenting their story. Scout, the German Shepherd puppy, began developing abilities that no domestic dog should possess. Under Masha's tutelage, he learned to fish. Yes, you heard that right. This dog learned to catch fish in the mountain streams, standing shoulder deep in the cold water, just like his bear siblings. He learned to identify edible plants and berries, and most remarkably, he learned to hibernate. Well, not true hibernation like bears do, but Scout adapted to the family's winter routine.
When Masha began preparing her den for the long winter months, Scout instinctively understood that this was a time for rest and conservation. He would sleep for extended periods, conserving energy just like the rest of his adopted family. Felix, the bobcat cub, developed his own remarkable adaptations. While bobcats are typically solitary creatures, Felix learned to function as part of a social group. He participated in the play behaviors of his bear siblings, but he also brought his own unique skills to the family dynamic. His keen hunting instincts made him an excellent early warning system for the group. Felix would often detect potential threats, like other bears or human presence, long before Masha or her cubs noticed. He became the family's scout, if you'll pardon the pun, using his superior hearing and night vision to keep everyone safe. But perhaps the most heartwarming development was how Masha herself changed. Wildlife experts noted that she seemed to become more patient, more creative in her problem-solving, and more protective than the average bear mother. She was essentially learning to be multilingual, understanding and responding to the different communication styles of 3 different species. Dr. Volkov and her team began documenting behaviors they had never seen before. Masha would bring different types of food to different members of her family based on their needs. She would discipline Scout differently than she disciplined her bear cubs, seeming to understand that his domestic dog psychology required a different approach. When Felix went through a phase of climbing trees and refusing to come down, typical bobcat behavior, Masha developed strategies to coax him back to the ground that involved patience and gentle persistence, rather than the more direct approach she might use with her bear cubs. We were witnessing the emergence of a new form of animal intelligence, Dr. Volkov explained. Masha was essentially becoming fluent in multiple species' languages and adapting her parenting style accordingly. This level of cognitive flexibility in wild animals was unprecedented in our research. As autumn arrived, the big question on everyone's mind was, what would happen when winter came? Bears hibernate for months during the harsh Carpathian winters. Could Scout and Felix survive in the den? Would Masha's natural instincts tell her to abandon her adopted children in favor of her biological cubs? The answer came as the first snows began to fall in November. Masha began the same den preparation ritual that bears have followed for millennia. She found a suitable site, a cave carved into a rocky hillside that would provide protection from the winter storms. But this year, she was preparing space for 5 instead of 3. The researchers watched in amazement as Masha carefully arranged the den to accommodate her entire unusual family. She seemed to understand that Scout and Felix would need different arrangements than her bear cubs, more insulation, different positioning within the den. And then something happened that brought tears to the eyes of even the most hardened wildlife biologists. As the family settled in for their long winter sleep, Scout and Felix positioned themselves on either side of Masha, with her bear cubs nestled close by. The 4 youngsters formed a protective circle around their adopted mother, sharing their body heat and creating a bond that transcended species. They emerged in March of 2020, all 5 animals healthy and strong. But the real test was yet to come. Spring is when young bears typically begin to separate from their mothers and establish their own territories. It's also when the harsh realities of the wild start to assert themselves. Would Scout and Felix be able to survive as their bear siblings became more independent? Fast forward to the spring of 2021, 2 full years after Masha first discovered the orphaned puppy and bobcat cub. The wildlife cameras were still rolling, and Dr. Volkov's team was about to capture footage that would shock the scientific community. Masha's bear cubs had, as expected, begun to establish their independence. They still visited their mother, but they were spending more time exploring their own territories and learning to survive on their own. This is completely normal bear behavior. But Scout and Felix, they had become something entirely new. Scout, now a fully grown German Shepherd, had developed into what researchers called a wilderness dog. He possessed all the loyalty and intelligence of his domestic breed, but he had learned survival skills that no pet dog could ever imagine. He could fish, forage for wild foods, and navigate the treacherous mountain terrain with the confidence of a wild animal. More remarkably, he had chosen to stay with Masha. Even as her biological cubs began to establish independence, Scout remained by her side as her loyal companion and helper. Felix, the bobcat, had grown into a magnificent adult, with the characteristic strength and grace of his species. But unlike typical solitary bobcats, Felix had learned to value family bonds. He had established his own territory, but it overlapped with Masha's range, and he visited regularly, sometimes bringing prey to share with his adopted family. The amazing part, they had all learned to communicate across species lines in ways that scientists are still trying to understand. Dr. Volkov's cameras captured Scout and Felix engaging in what appeared to be coordinated hunting strategies. Scout would flush small game toward areas where Felix was positioned, while Felix's superior senses would alert Scout to opportunities he might have missed. But the moment that truly amazed everyone came in late spring of 2021 when Masha emerged from hibernation with a new set of biological cubs, twins, just like her first litter. What happened next defied every prediction the research team had made. Scout immediately took on the role of protective older brother to the new cubs. Felix, despite having established his own territory, returned to help care for and protect the newest members of the family. The cameras captured Scout gently carrying one of the tiny cubs in his mouth when Masha needed to move the family to a new location. They filmed Felix teaching the young bears to climb trees, sharing skills that their mother couldn't provide. This unusual family had not only survived, they had thrived and expanded, creating a multi-generational, multi-species unit that continues to challenge our understanding of animal behavior and intelligence. Dr. Volkov's research, published in the Journal of Mammalogy in 2022, suggests that we may have vastly underestimated the cognitive and emotional capabilities of wild animals. Masha's ability to adapt her parenting style to accommodate different species indicates a level of abstract thinking and emotional intelligence that rivals what we see in primates. But perhaps the most important lesson from this remarkable story is about the transformative power of love and acceptance. Masha didn't just save 2 orphaned babies. She created a new kind of family that defied natural boundaries and showed us that survival isn't just about competition and aggression. In our human world, where differences often divide us, where we struggle to understand and accept those who are different from ourselves, the story of this bear family offers us a powerful reminder that love truly has no boundaries.
Scout learned to be more than just a domestic dog. He became a bridge between the wild and tame worlds. Felix learned that strength doesn't require solitude, that family bonds can make him more successful, not less. And Masha? She learned that a mother's love is expansive enough to embrace anyone who needs it, regardless of species, background, or origin. As of 2024, this remarkable family continues to thrive in the Carpathian Mountains. Masha, now a mature female in her prime, has successfully raised multiple litters with the help of Scout and Felix. The research team has documented at least 3 generations of this unusual family structure, with new bear cubs being integrated into the multi-species family unit each year. Scout, now 5 years old, has become something of a legend in the wildlife research community.
He represents a unique example of how domestic animals can adapt and thrive in wild environments when given proper guidance and protection. His offspring, yes, Scout has found a mate and produced puppies of his own, show remarkable wilderness survival skills while retaining the loyalty and intelligence of their domestic heritage. Felix has established himself as the dominant bobcat in his territory, but his relationship with his adopted family remains strong. He has taught multiple generations of bear cubs advanced hunting and climbing techniques, contributing skills to their survival toolkit that no bear mother could provide alone. The research data collected from this family has led to groundbreaking discoveries about animal cognition, interspecies communication, and the flexibility of wild animal behavior. Universities around the world now study the Masha protocol, the documented methods by which wild animals can successfully integrate and raise orphaned young of different species. Beyond the scientific discoveries, this story has had a profound impact on wildlife conservation efforts in Eastern Europe and beyond. The documentation of Masha's family has helped secure protected status for large areas of the Carpathian forest, ensuring that future generations of this remarkable family will have safe habitat. The story has also changed how wildlife rehabilitation centers approach orphaned animals. Rather than automatically segregating different species, some facilities are now experimenting with carefully supervised interspecies fostering programs with remarkable success rates. Conservation organizations have used Masha's story to raise awareness about the importance of maintaining wild corridors and protecting habitat connectivity. Scout's success as a wilderness-adapted domestic dog has highlighted the importance of keeping wild spaces intact, places where the boundaries between wild and domestic can blur in positive ways. Today, as I finish telling you this remarkable story, Masha's family continues to grow and adapt. The latest trail camera footage shows her newest cubs learning to fish alongside their older adopted siblings, with Scout patiently demonstrating techniques while Felix keeps watch from the trees above. This isn't just a story about one bear who made an extraordinary choice. It's about the fundamental interconnectedness of all life, the power of love to transcend boundaries, and the incredible adaptability of nature when we give it the space and protection it needs. In our human families, in our communities, and in our world, we have the opportunity every day to be like Masha, to open our hearts to those who are different from us, to adapt our approaches to meet diverse needs, and to create bonds that transcend traditional boundaries. We can be like Scout, learning new skills, adapting to new environments, while maintaining our essential nature and loyalty to those who have shown us kindness. And we can be like Felix, independent and strong, but never forgetting the family bonds that helped shape us, always ready to contribute our unique gifts to the well-being of others. The story of this remarkable bear family is still being written in the forests of the Carpathian Mountains. Every day, they continue to challenge our assumptions, expand our understanding, and demonstrate the transformative power of unconditional love. But their story doesn't have to end in those mountain forests. It can continue in our own lives, in our own communities, in our own families, as we choose to embrace the differences that make us stronger and build bonds that transcend every boundary. As we protect and preserve the wild spaces where stories like Masha's can unfold, we're not just saving habitat for animals, we're preserving the possibility for love to triumph over difference, for families to form in the most unlikely ways, and for all of us to learn that the heart recognizes no boundaries when it comes to those who need our care. The next time you see someone who seems different from you, someone who might need help or understanding, remember Masha finding those two tiny orphans beneath a fallen log. Remember that she could have walked away, could have decided they weren't her problem, could have focused only on her own kind. Instead, she chose love. She chose to expand her definition of family. She chose to believe that difference was not a barrier, but an opportunity to grow and learn and become more than she had ever been before. That choice,
That moment of saying yes to love instead of no to difference changed not just her life, but the lives of Scout and Felix, and through them, our understanding of what's possible in this beautiful, connected world we all share. And who knows, your choice to embrace someone different, to extend kindness beyond traditional boundaries, to believe in the power of love over fear, that choice might just change everything too. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey into the heart of the wild, where a mother's love knew no boundaries, and where the impossible became not just possible, but beautifully, powerfully real. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories from the natural world. And remember, the most extraordinary families are often the ones that form when love transcends every boundary we thought existed. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love to change everything.